I have never been so pumped up for an election, and it's so important that we change the direction of our country. Are you ready to take our country back? And how wonderful, how great it's going to be to take that gavel out of Nancy Pelosi's hands.
Only one way to send Nancy Pelosi back to San Francisco, and that's by electing Steve Chabot tomorrow. Yeah. Having been all over my district and all over Ohio, and for that matter all over the country, I can tell you that the excitement you see in this room is what I see every place I go. The American people have had enough of the spending, enough of the bailouts, but we still have to win these races one at a time. And I came today to say thanks to all of you for doing what you're doing to help Steve and to help the rest of our statewide ticket and the local candidates. Because you know, none of us up here get elected by ourselves. We need volunteers, we need contributors, and most importantly, we need voters. Oh yeah, we need voters. And so all the work that you're doing, we've got, as Steve said, we've got to run right through the finish line. No walking across the finish line. I've been at this for 9 months, and I was in Columbus yesterday helping our candidate up there, and I was telling this lady I've been at it for 9 months, and she says, well, you could have had a baby. And I said, don't worry, ma'am, I'm going to have a big baby on Tuesday night. Late February, early March, the president has down to the White House for the healthcare summit at the Blair House. Remember this? Yeah. The 7-hour Obama infomercial. You know, we were supposed to come and be potted plants in that room. We actually had ideas of our own that I think surprised the president. But during that discussion, he said, you know, if we have ideological differences or philosophical differences, he said, and I'll quote, that's what elections are for. Well, wasn't he right? We're going to have a big election tomorrow night, I think. We've got to run through the tape, but I do think we're going to have a big night. And I can tell you that if we're lucky enough to be in the majority, and I'm lucky enough to be the speaker, I know that will surprise some of you. It's going to be a lot different. And I'm not talking about just different than what's happening today in Washington. I'm talking about differently than when Republicans last had the chance to govern as well. Borrowing 41 cents for every dollar the federal government spends, it's time to go through every single line item in the budget, every single program, and ask this question. Is this spending so important that we're going to ask our kids and grandkids to pay for it? And if it doesn't meet that test, then why in the world are we doing it? Secondly, I think all of you know we've got big challenges facing us in our country. And it's time for us as Americans to have an adult conversation with each other. You know, I've watched leaders for the 20 years that I've been there look at some of these big problems, and it's like they look up at the top of the mountain, they see how steep it is, and decide to kick the can down the road another year. Well, guess what? We're running out of road to kick the can down. It's time for us, as Americans, to have this adult conversation about the big challenges that face our country. You know, we've got, we're the most resourceful people in the world. We're the most resilient people in the world. We can solve these problems. But it's time to have the conversation about how big these problems are and what the kind of solutions the American people want in order to solve them. But you know, none of that's really going to work until we fix the Congress itself. You know, I've watched this process for 20 years, and both parties tighten it up, tighten it up, and tighten it up, to the point where there are about 5 people who decide what the beginning and the end of a bill is going to look like. And they gerrymander the whole process in order to achieve a certain outcome. I mean, look what happened on the health care bill. There weren't any amendments on the floor. There's very little debate. And I just think it's time to open the process up and let all members, both sides of the aisle, participate in the development of a bill, the debate of a bill, and amending a bill. Because if we don't fix the Congress's ability to take on these big challenges that face us is really pretty limited. So I've got a lot of ideas, like, why don't we read the bills before we vote? We don't need 2,300-page bills. Why don't we get them to a size where we can actually have the time to read them, all right?
Why not publish them so we can?
That's right, don't worry, all these bills will be online for at least 3 days. At least 3 days for all Americans and the members to actually read the bill. But I gotta say, I feel fortunate to be here. Steve and I have been friends for 30 years. I've watched him go through a lot of races. And I told him back in the spring, I said, Steve, guess what? You're about to have the easiest race that you've ever had in your life. And you know what? I know you all worked hard, and I know he's worked hard. But when the numbers come in, this is going to be the biggest Chabot win I think that he's will have seen in his political career. That deserves some more. I've known Steve, as I said, for 30 years. I've never seen a guy work harder. You know, he ain't the flashiest guy in the world, all right? He doesn't have the best haircut, all right? But I'm gonna tell you what, he is the most rock-solid guy you're ever gonna want. I tell you what, if I'm in a foxhole, I'm gonna be in a foxhole with Steve Chabot, because I know exactly what he's doing. What you've been doing, just do it now for another 24 hours or 30 hours and bring this thing home, and we can save our country and we can renew the American dream for our kids and theirs. God bless all of you.
John Boehner, everybody. Things to say in conclusion here before we wrap it all up. Number one, hey Jamie, yeah. LaSalle, we may have lost the elder the other night, but at least we beat John's Moeller High School. I mean, we don't do it very often, but we did.